I stood on the dock, the early morning sun glistening on Sullivan Lake, feeling a storm brewing inside me. In my hand was a ridiculous letter from the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, HOA, demanding that I remove my boat from the water within 48 hours or face steep fines. The goal of these people was astounding. They had decided to dictate the terms of my property, a place that had been in my family for generations. As the new owner of the lakefront cabin and everything that went with it, I wasn't about to let them push me around. My mind wandered back to my grandfather, the man who had taught me everything I knew about fishing and caring for the environment. Back in the day, he had fought off a mining company that sought to damage the local ecosystem, fiercely believing in the saying, "Water is life, Jake." Now, here I was, staring at this absurd violation notice. It seemed like the HOA had been taking advantage of my grandfather's absence while I was focused on my tech career in Silicon Valley. "No way am I backing down," I muttered, gritting my teeth. I thought about my grandfather's legacy and his fights for what was right. I might not be armed with a shotgun filled with rock salt like he was, but I had something just as potent, knowledge of the law and a plan. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. It was Ray Delgado, my neighbor. I picked up, ready to unload my frustration. "Morning, Jake. I take it the welcoming committee struck again," he remarked with a chuckle. I recounted my story, and his laughter turned to a heavy sigh. "Those HOA folks have been getting bolder every year. They've already tried it with me over my boat shed looking unsightly. Told them exactly where they could stick their violation notice. They hate a fight, trust me." "Is that right?" I had no idea they were so audacious, I mused, anger boiling again as he spoke. "What do you think about them using my lake for fishing tournaments?" Ray scoffed. "Tournaments? They've been hosting fancy angling events on your lake for years. And I know for a fact they've been calling it their community's crown jewel. Your grandfather would have raised a holy hell over that." My brain raced as I processed this jaw-dropping information. These entitled HOA members had been holding events on my property without so much as a polite request? The thought made my blood boil even more. "Thanks for the heads up, Ray. I need to dig into this a bit further." After hanging up, I dove into my laptop, scrutinizing the HOA's website. There they were, smiling faces with overpriced fishing gear proudly displaying their trophies from tournaments held on my lake. They even advertised an upcoming championship with a significant cash prize. I could hardly believe it. They were treating the property my family had treaded carefully as their own private country club. It was time to get prepared. I called up Max Carter, an environmental lawyer who had been a friend since college. I could almost hear her smile through the phone as she answered. "What's up?" "Max, I need your help. The HOA is demanding I remove my boat, claiming it's against community guidelines. But they've been using my lake for their fishing tournaments without asking. I want to take action," I blurted out. There was a pause on the line before Max's excitement bubbled through. "Well, this sounds like a classic case of HOA overreach. Are you saying you actually own the lake itself?" "Yep. Sullivan Lake has been in my family since the 50s. And now I'm stuck with this crazy letter demanding I remove a boat that's been in my family for years. First things first, Jake. Don't respond to their threats yet. Let's gather evidence and firm up your ownership titles. I'll be there this weekend." As we spoke, a plan started to form in my mind, a golden opportunity to take a stand against the HOA and shield my family's legacy. I pictured Rich Wilkins, the HOA president, a man whose entitlement and arrogance would soon meet its match. With renewed purpose, I spent the next day preparing the cabin, going through my grandfather's old paperwork, which was ratty but full of information. I would comb through every detail to ensure that my family's ownership rights were undeniably clear. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a brilliant orange, I felt a thrill of anticipation. This was just the beginning. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine, and the showdown with the HOA was going to be a spectacle to remember. As the sun slipped behind the trees, casting shadows over the lake, I felt the adrenaline kicking in. I was ready to confront the HOA, specifically, Richard Wilkins, the man trying to bully me off my own property. I had the paperwork, I had the evidence, and now it was time to see if he had the guts to face me. Early the next morning, I headed to the community center for the HOA meeting, a twinge of excitement thrumming in my chest. I entered the building and glanced around. The room was filled with people unwillingly gathered under the oppressive weight of bylaws and aesthetics, most wearing expressions that hinted at a desperate desire to be anywhere else. Among them, I spotted Richard, perched at the front like a king on his throne, his perfect hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I stepped to the back, scanning the faces of the attendees. Would they stand with me, or were they too far taken in by the HOA's manipulations? I knew many were unhappy with their leadership, but would they speak up when the moment came? Richard droned on about mundane rules, lawn lengths, mailbox designs, but when he segued to the lake, I felt the room tighten with anticipation. We've had reports of an unauthorized boat on community waters, he declared, annoyance creeping into his voice. It's crucial we maintain our pristine values. That was my cue. I raised my hand, keeping my tone casual. Excuse me, Richard. Could you clarify something for us? When you say community waters, who exactly owns the lake? His smile faltered for just a moment before he regained his composure. The lake is managed by the HOA for the benefit of the community. It's under historical arrangements. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Some exchanged skeptical glances. Nerves buzzed in the air as Richard's confident facade flickered. I leaned forward, pressing on. Could you clarify what you mean by those arrangements? Because my family's deed states that Sullivan Lake is owned by us, the Sullivan family, since 1953. Seems like something doesn't quite add up, doesn't it? Richard's jaw tightened, and I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes as I held his gaze. There are historical arrangements, he repeated, the words sounding increasingly desperate. That may prove to be outdated information. Outdated? Is that why you've cheerfully allowed your residents to hold fishing tournaments on my private property? Because one doesn't need permission to trespass when you feel entitled, right? The atmosphere thickened as Brody, an older gentleman from the crowd, stood up. I believed my HOA dues covered access to the lake. Are we being misled, Richard? Richard's face paled as more murmurs echoed around the room. Let's not get hasty, he stuttered, clearly flustered. We have been managing the lake for years. It's a community resource. Just then, Max Carter entered, her presence authoritative as she stepped beside me, holding my property deed in hand. Actually, Richard, she addressed him directly, Jake's ownership is quite clear. Sullivan Lake is private property, and your association has no rights to dictate or manage its use without his consent. This means every tournament you've held here is a direct violation of the law. Gasps popped through the crowd like popcorn. Richard's composure began to crumble, his silver hair seeming to bristle with frustration. Your claims are unfounded, he shot back. We have a history. History doesn't equal legality, I countered, stepping closer. You've been using my property for years without permission. It's time for transparency, starting today. Let's review how many HOA funds have gone to lake management when you've blatantly lied about ownership. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but instead, it came out as a suppressed growl. I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I will not be bullied in my own community, he finally snapped, eyes darting around, realizing he was losing the room. He steeled himself, a last-ditch attempt to regain control. We will discuss this later. This is a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding or conspiracy? Max shot back, her confidence undeniable. Before Richard could deflect, I grinned. Let's record the HOA meeting's minutes. Let's make sure the world knows your history here, and your plans for a luxurious development on lake property you don't own. A tense silence filled the room, I could feel Richard's frustration. The very air crackled with anticipation, and whispers exchanged now were drenched in uncertainty and mistrust towards their president. This isn't over, Jake. You think you've won, but you've only just begun to uncover what lies beneath the surface, he spat, standing as if he would storm out. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat or a warning? The community deserves to know the truth. Richard turned and stormed out of the meeting room, leaving the murmurs behind him to spiral into a real discussion about transparency and accountability. As people began approaching with questions and support, I caught Max's eye. We had stirred the pot, and now it was boiling over. This is just the start, I whispered to her, a rush of determination pushing me forward. The tide was turning, and it felt like a wave ready to crash down on the very foundation of the HOA's reign. I had the documents, the backing of supportive neighbors, and now a sense of purpose larger than I had anticipated. This was no longer just about a boat or a lake, it was about standing up for what was right. And I was ready to ride that wave all the way to shore. He stormed out, leaving behind a wave of tension that rippled through the crowd. Murmurs of disbelief mingled with whispers of solidarity surrounded me, an unexpected swell of camaraderie that I hadn't anticipated. Jake, I never knew things were this deep, said Martha, an elderly woman beside me. I thought we were just paying for security and lawn upkeep. This might change everything. I nodded, determination coursing through me. It has to. Right now, we need to rally together. Richard might be the president, but he doesn't speak for all of us anymore. Max stepped forward, her presence commanding. Let's organize a meeting outside of this one, figure out a way to voice our collective concerns. Maybe we can even challenge Richard's authority. If we stand united, we stand stronger. The crowd started buzzing as they agreed, discussions igniting like a spark to dry tinder. I found myself becoming a reluctant leader, yet every word I spoke sent shockwaves of energy into the room. I felt the weight of the moment. It was as if the echoes of my grandfather were guiding me, reminding me we were warriors of the land. As the meeting wrapped up, a plan began to form. We set a date for the next gathering, where I would present the case for transparency, for accountability. This was about more than my boat, it was about defending our homes, our lives, and our lake. The following week flew by in a blur of preparation. I pulled every document I could find to support our cause, emails, old contracts, photos of tournaments held without consent. A small team of us met regularly, building the momentum that was now palpable in the air. Finally, the day of the emergency meeting arrived, and the buzz around the community center felt electric. Our assembly was packed with familiar faces. Those who'd once surrendered to the HOA's authority were now ready to stand against it. I stepped to the front, my heart pounding but excitement bubbling beneath the surface. Thank you all for coming, I began, feeling every eye on me, my pulse quickening. Today isn't just about the boats or the lake, it's about our rights to our homes. Richard Wilkins has capitalized on our complacency for too long. Richard entered, his expression a mask of anger, but my focus was on the audience, focused, fiery eyes that met mine with a burning desire for change. Jake, you've made your point, Richard interrupted, trying to interject with his usual bravado. This meeting is unnecessary and a misrepresentation of our community values. We've adhered to what has always been customary. But I pressed on with a powerful wave of resolve. And who determines customary? You? Because I have a right to question that. One man can't dictate the future of our community, especially one who constantly disregards the law. Gasps echoed against the walls. Hands started rising in support from unexpected corners. Richard tried to reinstate his control, but I leaned into the crowd more. Let's hear from you. Who here has been unjustly affected by the HOA? Who here is tired of being told how to live their lives? A tide of hands shot up, testimonies unfolded, stories of fee hikes, unfulfilled promises, and of a community that had long been dismissed. One after another, residents stood in solidarity, igniting the room with a growing sense of rebellion against the stifling authority they had endured. Richard's face paled as he realized the unity forming before his eyes. This is madness, he bellowed, desperation creeping into his voice. No, Richard, I countered, this is a community awakening. You may think you hold the power, but it fades when people choose to stand together. We refuse to live in fear of your fines and threats. You think your title grants you control, but it doesn't. The lake belongs to us all. His bravado cracked, and a vein pulsed in his temple, sweat beading on his forehead. I sensed victory was within reach, but Richard had one final card to play. You think you can just come in here and change everything? I'll take this to the attorneys, you'll all regret this. But I wasn't backing down. I looked into the eyes of my neighbors, emboldened by their support. You may take it to them, but we'll show them you don't have a legal leg to stand on. You've misused power for too long. People deserve to know the truth about their community. At that moment, a woman I had never met before stood. I found some documents from the county office, she said, her voice steady as she raised the papers high. These show that the HOA's claims about the lake are unfounded. It's not managed by them at all. It's a private body of water, as Jake says. We can challenge this. A ripple of shock spread, the evidence she held was a game changer. Richard's composure shattered completely. You can't do this. But by now, the tide had turned. We will, I amplified, the room rallying behind me. Together. The resolve echoed with renewed strength through the crowd. They were ready to not only challenge but to fight. The gathering erupted into chaos, cheers and shouts blending as Richard's authority crumbled before me, the very foundation of his regime shaking under the weight of truth. Days later, as I walked to the lake's edge, I looked out over the water, the sun casting golden ripples. My boat bobbed gently on the shore, a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fight we had begun. The community came together, my neighbors and friends working to reclaim what belonged to them. We hadn't just won back the lake, we had reclaimed our strength. News articles started popping up about the HOA's questionable history, and the surge of support melted away their threat, their facade burned away in the light of justice. And as I cast my line into the lake, the moment felt surreal, a new beginning, forged by unity. Suddenly, a heavy splash jolted me from my thoughts. I turned to see Richard, standing alone at the edge, his features etched with fury mingled with despair. For a moment, our eyes locked. The battle wasn't just about land, it was transformed into a fierce clash of ideals. But there was something else hidden behind his eyes, fear. "Don't think this is over, Jake," he muttered through clenched teeth, the arrogance of his former authority still flickering. With a quiet smile, I glanced back at the lake before turning towards him. "You're right. It's just the beginning." And as I reeled in my line, I could practically feel the weight of change surging through the very waters. It was a force of nature, something that could never be stopped. This was our lake, our victory, and nothing could take that away. The ripples were just starting, and as I cast my line again, the world began to shift beneath the surface, ready for whatever came next. A new chapter had begun, etched eternally in the heart of a community ready to rise.